I'm waking up on Sunset Boulevard, maxing out all my credit cards, living my own LA story, living it up till the morning.
Kawhi Leonard, unfortunately, does not get to live his own LA story, as he has been shipped off to maybe the furthest possible thing from LA, as he is stuck in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Welcome back, everybody, to the Slam Drunks podcast presented by Bias Boston Sports. I am your host, Nick Piccioni. Back by my side this week is a man that needs no introduction.
Sup?
And Pete's here. Pete's back. Ryan is still in Florida, hopefully getting pink eye from the fucking disgusting water parks that he's vacationing at. So instead, we have Jordan Leandre, a very special guest host. You might know him as the man who eradicated another man's testicles from 60 feet away. You can kill a man that far away. How you doing, Jordan?
I'm doing good. We're almost a year to the date of that happening, too.
Are we really?
We are close.
Happy birthday to not that man's children, because there will be none of those. So this is by far the worst week in sports every year. It's All-Star break, so the only sport we have playing, which is baseball, is off for 4 days. At least the Red Sox were off for 4 days, which is awful. It's so long. I can't stand it. They're finally back, but thankfully for once the NBA decided to pull through and give us some juicy news this week. So unlike last week, we get to talk about things that aren't the Summer League, which I don't know about you guys, but I'm fucking thrilled about. I hate talking about the Summer League. I have to pretend like I like it, and obviously it's really fucking hard to do that because I don't know shit about the Summer League. Henceforth, I have to drink 2 of these this week because fucking Mikey got the champion of the Summer League right. I did not. The only thing I predicted was that Marcus Smart would sign this week, which we'll talk about later, but we're obviously going to lead off with Kawhi Leonard. That's the biggest story in the NBA right now. Kawhi Leonard is going to the Toronto Raptors along with Danny Green in exchange for DeMar DeRozan, something named Podol, and a really highly protected first-round pick. Pete, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts on the Kawhi Leonard deal as a whole?
Yeah, so we heard, I think, these rumors going into the deal actually happening that there was a good chance that Toronto was going to make a significant offer, that the Spurs were going to be interested in, but I actually never thought that it was really going to happen, just because if you think about it, like, why would Kawhi first have any interest in playing for Toronto, and why would the assets that Toronto would have to give up, why would they give that up for Kawhi? So it's a pretty crazy deal, in my opinion. I did not expect to see DeMar DeRozan leave. I think a lot of people in the NBA didn't either.
Expect to see him leave either.
Yeah. And then Danny Green, like that, the whole situation sucks for him. He just opted into his deal, I think. So for him to have to now go to fucking basketball Siberia, that blows for him. Very weird deal, especially considering the name. I mean, if you think about all the different names that were being floated around here, we had LA, Boston, San Antonio. I mean, you had huge basketball markets, and what ended up happening is he went to fucking Toronto.
That is true.
Nice.
He went to Toronto. And the thing for me that was interesting was I feel like it's hard to tell which team won the deal because I don't think either of them really won or lost. Like, it almost seems like like San Antonio got to move the player that didn't want to be there, and they got something for it, but they got at best like the 23rd pick in the draft, something named Podol, and DeMar DeRozan, who, if you add him to LaMarcus Aldridge, that team's never going to shoot another 3 again. Like, it's just an entire team of mid-range jumpers, and that's it. Jordan, what are your general thoughts on the trade? And then we can get into our winners and losers after that.
I thought the trade was pretty crazy. I mean, I was at work when it happened, and nobody I work with understands basketball, so I had to kind of contain my I guess you could say, excitement and puzzlement of the deal itself. But Kawhi going to Toronto, I don't really know as though that makes much of an impact on, competition for the Celtics, because I felt like DeMar DeRozan was an absolute assassin against Boston. So him going to San Antonio in exchange for Kawhi, I don't know if that necessarily changes much. But overall, I think it was a pretty weird deal to see him wind up going there. And I think it's kind of funny that he sits out an entire year pretty much, and he essentially got deported. They kicked his ass out. They sent him to Canada. But yeah, I mean, Pete pretty much nailed it on the head. You see teams like LA and Boston floating around in this trade, and then all of a sudden he winds up in Toronto for DeMar DeRozan. So it's kind of an interesting turn of events when you consider the other teams that were interested.
Yeah, and we can talk about DeMar DeRozan a little bit more too, because that man got done dirty. That was really fucking underhanded shit they pulled, which, like, that's how it works, and I think DeRozan knows that, but he still has a right to be pissed, especially since it's one thing for, like, in the Isaiah Thomas situation, like, there was a mutual interest, but there was no, like, guarantee we're not trading you. No one told him you're going to be here forever. But they legitimately told DeMar DeRozan, we're not going to trade you, don't worry. And then they fucking trade him. Like, it's really kind of a shitty move. I know that loyalty doesn't mean anything in the NBA, but that's genuine dishonesty, and that's pretty shit. Pete, what are your feelings for DeMar DeRozan?
I like him a lot more than other people do. So seeing him get traded, I was like, whoa, holy shit. But it makes a lot of sense for Toronto if you think about it, because they've tried to use Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan together, mix in Serge Ibaka, whoever they're going to mix in, and see if they can contend in the East, and they weren't able to do that. Now, I do have some reservations in them kind of jumping ship on this the year that LeBron leaves the East, because I don't want to say it's completely wide open, because the Celtics are obviously still the heavy favorites, with Philly looking a little bit on the outside looking in. But I think that the East is open enough where if Toronto added a piece or two to that team, then they could be right there in the top 2 or 3. So in that sense, I'm a little, I just don't know really what the direction of their team is going. If they're going to hang on to Kawhi, see if they can make a run, and then hope to re-sign him like a Paul George situation, then that makes sense. But if they're just going to hold on to him, be kind of a middle-of-the-road type of team, and then trade him at the trade deadline to LA or something like that, I mean, I just don't see where their end game is really. And it's a low-risk, high-reward situation, because they have no expectations for them right now, but I'm still interested to see where they go.
Yeah, so in your opinion, Pete, who won or lost the trade?
I mean, I have to say that San Antonio won the trade just because they were able to get a player like DeMar DeRozan for a guy that did not want to be there, and he probably wasn't going to play there. So I think I have to say San Antonio, because I think that it's just such a huge gamble for Toronto. I mean, we may look at this in 6 months or whatever and say they clearly won the trade, but right now I have to say San Antonio.
What about you, Jordan? What do you think about the trade and who was the victor in this situation here?
For starters, I kind of thought that Toronto might have traded the wrong guy. I mean, originally when I heard their name pop up, I thought it was going to be Kyle Lowry that goes in that deal. I mean, it just made so much sense. And there was rumors that he'd be traded there last year. And then Tony Parker signed in Charlotte. So I thought that made it even more likely that Lowry would wind up getting moved in a deal for Kawhi. And then a tandem of DeRozan and Leonard is deadly. I mean, that's something that you could legit, put together and build pieces around and make a legitimate run in the Eastern Conference. Lowry's been a notorious choker, so I don't know how he and Kawhi are going to mesh well, if they're going to mesh well on the court. That being said, I agree with Pete. Again, San Antonio probably won that deal just because they got a guy. They were able to get a superstar talent in exchange for a guy that didn't even want to be there anymore. And I'm not entirely sure how many more years DeRozan has on his contract, but I believe it is more than this season. I think he's got a couple more years after this.
I believe it's 2 plus 1. Yeah,
two and an option.
Okay, yeah. So they got a guy under control for a little bit. I mean, they did trade Danny Green, which sucks for them because he's been a guy that has performed in the postseason year after year, especially from long range. But I think ultimately they're going to like what they got in a return with DeRozan and Jakob Poeltl, I think is his name. But he's a decent backup. He'll come in, probably get a few rebounds late in games. But I think they're going to like the return, especially since it's essentially replacing nothing, because Kawhi probably wouldn't have played this year anyway there.
Yeah, his name is something called Poeltl. That's his name. Just to clear that up for you. So I agree with you guys. I think the Spurs won the trade. I think it's part of an interesting trend that's been going on in the NBA with trades lately, in that teams that trade away the best player are often getting the better end of the deal. And that's in part, and I think in large part, due to the fact that these NBA superstars have so much mobility and self-determination that trading one away for pieces that you have more control over, such as either draft picks or younger players, such as Victor Oladipo last year, turns out to be a better investment. I'm not saying that's going to be the case here, because there are some glaring faults in DeMar DeRozan's game that could prevent him from being a superstar, because that because we all know Kawhi Leonard is a top 10 talent in the league easily when he's invested. The question is, can DeMar DeRozan with Greg Popovich become a player that is of a higher caliber than he was in Toronto? And I'll tell you my dream scenario, my evil scenario that I dreamt up was somehow the Spurs and the Lakers play each other in the playoffs, and the Spurs with DeMar DeRozan beat the Lakers while Toronto lose in the playoff. I think that would be so much fucking fun to watch. Just the sheer salt coming out of Toronto, because we don't talk enough about how Toronto is one of the saltiest, shittiest markets around. Like all of Canadian fandom is pretty like absurd and stupid, but Toronto is like the epicenter of it. So watching the salt and the tears out of that would be a once in a lifetime thing to experience. It would be the running of the Bonita for like Celtics Twitter. It'd be fantastic. Let's talk about the futures of both of these teams, because this is the biggest story in the NBA so far this offseason. So I think we should just kind of run with it for a little bit longer. Let's talk about Toronto's future. They have Kawhi Leonard now for 1 year. They have to try to convince him to stay. I give them about a 0% chance of doing that. But in that case, maybe they start the tank and they start the rebuild. Jordan, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts on the near to further out future for Toronto?
Near future, I could see them probably panning out as a top maybe 3 or 4 seed in the Eastern Conference. I don't see them overstepping Boston or Philadelphia for that matter. Like you said, don't really give them any of a chance of re-signing Kawhi. I mean, obviously it depends on how the season goes, because maybe he winds up liking it there, because we thought there was no chance in hell Paul George stayed in OKC, and then he wound up doing that. But if they lose out on Kawhi 100%, they're going to blow it up, and they're going to probably trade Lowry, and they're just going to tank and try and kind of do what Philly did, hopefully a little bit faster and for their sake. But as far as their near future goes, I don't see them going very far in the playoffs. They'll be a top 4 seed because the East is so crappy, other than the top 2 or 3 teams in the conference. But further on down the road, it really depends on how Kawhi feels about his experience there this season.
Yeah, so that's the interesting thing about rebuilding in the East is such a bad conference as a whole that you have to really suck to tank in. Like, you have to be abysmal. That, like, you have to have the number 1 pick every year and then have it be injured every time, like Philly did. Like, or you have to be Boston and just be better at everything than everybody. That's the other option. And we know Toronto isn't that. They just fired their coach of the year, head coach. So clearly there's some organizational shit that they don't have figured out, just like Philly, which we'll talk about in a little bit as well. But I think that it's going to be really interesting. I looked it up because I was curious to see how long Kawhi Leonard could legally hold out. And he's allowed to hold out for 30 days. And then if he holds out for a day longer, he is no longer allowed to become a free agent. So he's going to have to play unless he can fake an injury and get away with it. So,
which he did all last year. So
he did all last year for a better organization on a better team. So I wouldn't put it past him, but I think I hope for his sake that he's aware that if he sits out another year, then his price goes down significantly. And apparently money's not an issue for him, considering he left $80 million on the table in San Antonio just to get away from Greg Popovich. But I think it's an interesting thing to look for is if he does hold out, or if he's going to fake an injury, or maybe he'll get a real injury and milk it, which is, again, what he did last year. Do you have any extra thoughts on Toronto, Pete, or do you just want to jump straight into the Spurs' future?
Well, I mean, I think, like I said, for Toronto, like, and you guys pretty much just hammering it home, like, the East is so bad that Toronto can be a pretty shitty team. And if they have Kyle Lowry and Kawhi for 2 months or whatever, they're still going to be a top 4 or 5 team just because of how bad the East is. So it's going to be really difficult for them to sell off all of their pieces and start to rebuild for the future if they have pretty decent players on their team, just because the East is so bad.
Yeah, the East is really shit. I think one of the things that's interesting, and it's something that has kind of manifested itself in terms of the Kyrie deal from last year, and that when it happened, a lot of people were blaming Kyrie, saying that, he's not a team player, he doesn't want to be there. And then when LeBron left, I know a lot of people here looked at and said, and affirmed their opinion that, Kyrie left because he knew LeBron was leaving. And now that LeBron is gone, it makes sense that he left early, so he wasn't left with the shit pile. So here's a scenario. If Greg Popovich leaves the Spurs and retires in 2 years, do we look back and say, Kawhi Leonard acted like a little shit, but he probably made the right decision. What do you guys think about that scenario happening? Jordan, I'll start with you.
Just based on the Toronto coaching situation, I mean, it seems kind of. I mean, I feel like the Spurs would have a better insurance policy for Popovich than the Raptors do, because we've seen them mishandle situations many times, especially with personnel. So I don't know if it's going to be the same situation as a LeBron leaving Cleveland, that in the Kyrie situation. It seems like Kawhi felt like, I mean, maybe he knew something we didn't know, because he did say that he felt like they weren't very loyal to him even while he was there. So, I mean, it's kind of a toss-up for me, but I don't think it'll be anywhere near the Kyrie and LeBron situation. But
I just thought it was an interesting comparison. I'll ask you as well, Pete. Do you have any thoughts on the Greg Popovich angle on this whole trade scenario?
Well, a lot of people compare him to Brady, so I kind of look at this scenario like Brady, Belichick, and Gronk right now. Like everyone, and Kraft, I guess too. Everyone's kind of like battling together, and we don't know what's happening behind closed doors. So we're all kind of formulating our own opinions and trying to figure out what is happening, even though we don't know the whole story. So that's kind of what I feel like is happening right now in San Antonio. Like I don't know when Pop is going to retire, but for me, it just as an outsider looking in at the situation, it seems like Kawhi is kind of just like a different cat, and he pretty much always wanted to go to LA. So if he plays in Toronto this season, or if he's traded midseason to LA, or he just signs in LA as a free agent, we kind of know that although maybe the situation is shitty in San Antonio right now, Kawhi really didn't have anything to do with that, and he was kind of just an outside, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. So one of the things that is ancillary to this topic, but I think is important to mention, is the impact that this trade has had on the rest of the league, specifically for two teams, because this is pretty much closed. This has, barring any insane, unforeseen trades, this has pretty much closed the book on star players moving this offseason. So the Lakers and the Sixers are now pretty much set with their teams. Who do you think is more disappointed? The Philadelphia 76ers not getting anyone, or LeBron James being stuck with the trash that he is? Adding to that trash, they just signed Michael Beasley, so they're not getting any better in terms of personality. What do you think about that, Pete?
I think it has to be LA. You have to be more disappointed if you're them, because I think, again, like it's one of those things where I think everybody pretty much knew that LeBron was going to LA, but they also thought that maybe they were going to get Paul George, maybe they were going to get Kawhi Leonard, maybe they were going to get DeMarcus Cousins. I mean, just name the player that you thought that was going to go there after LeBron. And then you saw them making all these weird types of moves where they're signing, Rondo for 1 year, $9 million, or they're signing Beasley for, whatever. For me, it seems like they're trying to just right now surround LeBron with playmakers that will make it so that they can get into the playoffs, get bounced really quickly, and then look again towards next offseason. If I'm Philly, they've been trusting the process for how long now? So just trust it one more freaking season and then just see what happens next offseason. And at the very worst, I think that they're the second best team in the East. So once you get into the playoffs, anything can happen, really, especially if you have a player like Embiid.
Yeah, so I kind of disagree with you. I think Philly's more disappointed because Philly had the ability, a fairly simple ability, to be able to have 2 max contracts this year. They could have had, or at least they could have fit Kawhi, Paul George, or Kawhi, LeBron, or whatever. They could have fit it under the cap, and everyone in Philly was talking so much shit about how their team was going to get so much better this year, and now they've lost their a couple of their important bench players. They lost out on all 3 of the big guys that they were connected to, and now they can't even sign. They can't even get Nemanja Bjelica, or whatever the fuck this guy's name is, to sign with them, because he told them that he was going to go scurry off to Europe, and then he ends up probably going to sign with this fucking Sacramento Kings. So I think it looks worse for them, and it's almost all of it, I think, is due to the fact that Brian Colangelo couldn't keep his stupid Twitter fingers shut and had to go and blast all of his players online. And now that Brett Brown is running the front office for Philadelphia, I think we're kind of seeing what we saw in the Boston series, that Brett Brown he might be good, but he is outclassed by the best of the best, and he definitely doesn't know how to run a front office, because the team is kind of falling apart around him, other than all the players that were already there and under contract. Like, has he added anything? Like, he signed Amir Johnson back. Yippee, yay. He drafted 2 backup point guards for a team that already has like 3 point guards. So I don't know what the fuck they're doing over there. And I think that makes it look worse. Like LA is making a lot of weird signings and signing like weird, like dumb or problematic malcontents. But at least most of those are 1-year deals and they can get out from under it immediately if it doesn't work. Philly's kind of just, they are what they are, and what they are is not good enough, in my opinion. I don't know what you think, Jordan. What do you think about this?
I agree with you that I think Philly is the team that's probably the most disappointed in this situation.
Fuck you, Pete. Fuck you, Pete.
Not even just because they missed out on LeBron.
Jordan, you're fired.
Okay. Not even just because they missed out on LeBron. I think it's more along the lines of, like you said, they could fit the max contracts in there. And I don't think they have a legitimate chance of getting Kawhi Leonard in the offseason now that he's not going to play a full season there. I think if he went there, not only does Philly probably leapfrog Boston just because they have Embiid, who's just about unstoppable, and then Kawhi, who would be just about unstoppable. Now that you don't have him, you're pretty much the same team you rolled out last year, minus your top 2 3-point or minus one of your top 3-point shooters off your bench. But losing out on him, now you're just the second best team in the East. I know anything can happen in the playoffs, but if the Celtics stay healthy, there's no team in the East that can beat them. And losing out on Kawhi, at least for the Lakers standpoint, they didn't have to give anything up to wind up getting him anyway if he winds up signing their next offseason. So I think it also kind of depends on how the next offseason goes. But as of right now, Philly's probably the most disappointed because they missed out on everybody they were going for, and they have no chance of getting Kawhi next free agency because he didn't play a year there. And I don't think they had a shot. No shot at it.
Yeah, I think this offseason has been more detrimental to the future of Philly. I think LA is going to be a worse team next year for sure, Pete. But I think Philly might have fucked up like the next couple of years by failing to make moves where they could have. I think a lot of that is due to the fact that Brett Brown is running the front office, and it's not Brian Colangelo, a.k.a. Jimmy Hotfingers on Twitter or whoever the fuck he fucking like. Maybe he outsourced the shit to Kevin Durant, and that's why he got caught, but I don't know. We've talked about Kawhi for about 20, 25 minutes now. Why don't we move into some Celtics talk, considering this is a Celtics podcast? We'll start just really quickly to finish up the Kawhi story. How do you think this? Do you think that this trade affects the Celtics at all? Like, I know it makes Toronto a better team this year. Do you think it makes them good enough to legitimately challenge the Celtics in a 7-game series? Pete, we'll start with you.
I think that there's just so many. Like external factors that is going to go into it that is kind of hard to say right now. Like, nobody even knows if Kawhi is going to play in Toronto. I mean, if he just decides to straight up not play or milk an injury, like you said, or something like that, then this obviously makes Toronto way worse. But if you get a motivated and healthy Kawhi that really wants to prove to everyone that he's one of the best players in the NBA, then I think that this does make Toronto better. I don't think that they make them necessarily better than Boston, but it's another team that maybe Boston has to look over their shoulder a little bit for. But ultimately, I don't think it really matters. The Celtics are far and away the best team in the East right now.
I agree that the Celtics are definitely the best team in the East. I don't think anyone who's not Nick Wright and or Brain Dead, I know those are interchangeable, but I don't think there are a lot of people saying that the Celtics aren't the best team right now. But I do think it's interesting that Kawhi Leonard, if the Celtics were to face Toronto with a fully engaged and fully healthy Kawhi Leonard, I think that there's a very legitimate argument to be made that Kawhi Leonard would be the best player on the court, regardless of who else is on there for the Celtics. Jordan, what do you think about this? Do you think this affects the Celtics standings at all, or do you think it's just another challenge added for them?
I think moving DeRozan in the deal kind of makes them only slightly better. Like, if they had traded Lowry, I think it would have been a legit. The Celtics need to look over their shoulder. They need to be worried because, I mean, DeRozan and Leonard together would be lethal. But with Lowry, the notorious choker, and the fact that didn't work out with DeRozan, I think only swapping DeRozan and Kawhi only makes them marginally better. I mean, I know we're overlooking the fact Danny Green's one of the better three-point shooters in the league, but I don't necessarily think that he, with Kawhi and Kyle Lowry, is going to be enough to really make much of a difference. But if Kawhi is motivated, and like you said, if they get into a series where the Celtics and Raptors are playing each other, Kawhi would be the best player on the floor. But the supporting cast around Kyrie versus Kawhi is just so much more in favor of Kyrie that I don't see that being anything the Celtics should be worried about.
Yeah, I agree. I think it makes them a more interesting matchup. I don't think they're no long. I think even with DeRozan, they would have been a rollover, like a 5 or 6 game series max. I think now that it's definitely a 6 game series between the two. If they make it that far, and if the choking isn't so institutionalized that even Kawhi can't save them. But let's move into real Celtics news from this week. We finally have a Smarf sighting. Marcus Smart has finally signed, and he signed with the Celtics for a deal which I think surprised a lot of people. I'll be honest, it didn't really surprise me. I thought that his market value was somewhere between 12 and 14 at the beginning, and I know that he wasn't getting interest, but a lot of that is because what's the point of giving Smart an offer sheet if the Celtics are going to match no matter what, because your price range is their price range as well. So I think that I'm kind of blowing the lead here, or bearing the lead here, but I think if they had played hardball, either lowballed him with a multi-year deal, or just made him sign the qualifying offer, that he would be pissed off. And I don't buy into the people who are like, oh, he's happy now, he'll play better. Like that's not a real, like that's kind of a thing, but that's not a real thing. The issue would be next offseason when he's unrestricted and he can sign wherever the fuck he wants, and he's pissed at you for making him play for 6.1 or for like 10 on 1 year. And then when you're unrestricted and when the cap goes up by $9 million, that's when you have a real market. So this was a preemptive strike by the Celtics, and it might burn them in the short term, but I think overall this is going to be viewed like the Avery Bradley contract, which was ludicrous when they signed him to 8 years per, and then by the end of it, he was, one, still a good player playing up to his contract, and two, that contract, because of the way the cap moved, was a really easy-to-move contract that they got 2 years of Marcus Morris out of. So I don't know what you guys think about it. I'll start with you, Pete. What do you think about the whole situation?
Well, I think like you kind of mentioned or alluded to a little bit, the Celtics really could have fucked Smart if they wanted to. They could have said, we tried to offer you a deal similar to this last offseason. You didn't want to sign it, so take the qualifying offer. We'll talk to you next free agency period, which would have hurt them too, like you said, because it would have upset the player. Maybe he would have played great in hopes of getting a huge contract and then ditching the Celtics next season. But the Celtics really could have played hardball with him, and they decided not to, which ultimately I think is the right decision. I mean, Smart's been a good player for his entirety of the Celtics, and I think he's one of those guys that you just kind of need on your team in order to win a championship, even if his offensive output isn't insane. Looking at this move, though, a little bit like deeper, I think it's also helpful for the Celtics because they don't really have a lot of those guys that are making between like 12 and 15 million or anything like that. So if there is
just
a deal,
interrupt you real quick, I'm pretty sure he's the only player on the team making between 20 and 10 million.
Really?
I think so.
So if the Celtics did want to make a deal for an Anthony Davis, or even looking at this past deal, if they wanted to make a deal for Kawhi Leonard, they didn't really have any of those guys to really match up the salary unless they are getting rid of a Kyrie, Horford, Hayward, which they said they didn't want to do. So to me, he's a tradable asset that can help, fix money issues moving forward, and he helps your team right now. And I think everybody's pretty much happy with it.
Yeah, so the one thing that I saw a lot of was, or at least I heard a lot of on the radio today and yesterday, were hosts complaining about this is a lot of money for Smart. Like, you didn't need to sign him to this. And I know that they talk about it and they gloss over the fact they'll say sarcastically, "Oh, I know he's the core of the team, he's the heart and soul." He's legitimately the heart and soul of this team. And I know people like to point to his shooting metrics, and he sucks at shooting the ball. I agree, but he is statistically and objectively a net add to the team. He adds win shares. Like, he is a winning player. I know that that's partly eyeball test, but you can literally quantify the fact that he adds wins to the team. So I think it's worth it personally. But what do you think, Jordan?
I loved the deal, and like you said, I thought it was right in the price range that the Celtics were in, or Marcus Smart's value was going to be. I had expected him to probably get 14 to 16, so 13 was just a little bit under where I had expected him to go. And I honestly feel like if Ainge waited a little bit longer, there probably would have been a team that's just like, okay, there's something going on here. We're going to go and try and make an offer that the Celtics won't match and go somewhere between 17 and 19, maybe even 20. just because Marcus Smart is that kind of player that can just add wins. And we saw a team like Sacramento offer a shit ton of money to Zach LaVine. So, I mean, and Marcus Smart, in my opinion, helps his team win more than LaVine does. I mean, he played in Minnesota when they were bad, and then Chicago when they were an absolute dumpster fire last year, and they offered him $20 million. But Marcus Smart's a winning player, and the way the defensive intensity just picked up after he came back from injury last year in the playoffs against Milwaukee, and he was just at the forefront of all these the comeback against Philly in Game 2, getting them to 7 games against LeBron in the Cavs in the Eastern Conference Finals. He was right in the heart and soul, or right in the center of that defensively. He even had a few of his moments offensively that surprised a lot of people, but he hit a lot of big shots, and he always has done that. Even though he's a terrible shooter, he always seems to hit a big shot when he needs to, and then he makes those hustle plays. I don't remember what game it was in the playoffs, but I think it was against Milwaukee where he dove on the floor, got hacked by about 4 guys, somehow came out with the ball, then found Al Horford for a wide open layup that wound up clinching the game. But like those are the type of plays that the Celtics need, and $13 million a year for that type of player is a beautiful deal, considering guys like Evan Turner and Courtney Lee make $16+ million a year, and they are half the player Marcus Smart is, or half the importance to a team as Marcus Smart is.
Yes, I think the other interesting thing that I heard a lot of on the radio recently were people talking about, oh fuck, oh my god, I just got hit really hard by my fucking beer. That hit me really hard. I was fucking thinking. You know what it is? It's because I'm looking at Shams' Twitter trying to see if we have any breaking news, and I got completely distracted. But, fuck me dead. Where's Ryan? Yeah, but
getting pink eye.
So the thing, hopefully, fingers crossed, right? I want him to come back just like crusty and like red, like not just like I want him to not be able to open his eyes. I want someone to have to I want him to have to push the SAP button on his remote to enjoy the game. Buenos noches, amigos. But the thing with Marcus Smart is that he is, no matter, like, I know I already said this, but he's value add no matter how you want to quantify it, be it eye test or literal statistical fact. He adds wins to the team. And part of the reason why there wasn't a market for him is because all the winning teams had spent up to their cap space. So there's not enough room to add a $12 million player. You don't add him to a losing team because he's only valuable on a team that wants to win. And the only other team that could have added him, which I think would have been a great ad for them, and they should have gone for it, is Philly. But Philly was holding out hope that they'd get one of these big fish. And they also happen to have about 5 point guards. So he doesn't fit in the roster. So I think the argument that he didn't have a market is valid, but also temporary, because there's definitely going to be a market for him next year if they didn't sign him. So I think one more thing I want to talk about on Marcus Smart is how you guys think this could affect both Kyrie and Terry Rozier moving forward. Because they now have 3 legitimate, pretty good point guards on the roster. One is up next year. One can opt out one is going to be an RFA next year in Terry Rozier. And Kyrie can obviously opt out. So I want to know if you guys think this has any impact or on either of them, or if it doesn't really affect their markets or their future in the Celtics at all. What do you think about this, Jordan?
I just wanted to start by putting another team out there that I thought would have been a good fit for Marcus Smart. Was right after LeBron signed, I thought the Lakers were going to jump in on it. I honestly did. I mean, that was before they got Rondo, they got Lance Stevenson, but I thought Marcus Smart would have been a great addition.
If you added Marcus Smart to Rondo and Lonzo, you'd have 3 point guards who can't shoot worth shit. So that would.
Well, no, I was saying before they signed those guys, before they signed Rondo and Stevenson, I thought Smart would have been a good addition to them. But as far as how it affects Kyrie and Rozier, I don't think it has any effect on the future of Kyrie here. I think whether they kept Smart or not, the Celtics would have the same odds of keeping him. I still don't think Rozier is here long term. I think the Celtics are going to find the right deal. Even though Danny Ainge has like a man crush on Terry Rozier, he had the same type of man crush on Isaiah Thomas. So I think if the right deal presents itself, Rozier will be included in it, because I don't think he's going to put his own personal feelings in the way of winning, and it's exactly what he did with Isaiah. So I don't think it affects Kyrie that much, but I think keeping Marcus Smart almost guarantees that Rozier will not be here long term, and I still think he'll be traded by the deadline this year.
Yep. So one thing, I just remember what I was going to say earlier, even though I deflected it so well and you couldn't notice, I completely lost my train of thought because I'm such a fucking professional. One of the things that I heard a lot on the radio today and yesterday was talking about how Danny Ainge doesn't miss on players in the NBA. He knows he deals them at the exact right time in terms of guys like Avery Bradley and Isaiah Thomas, and he keeps them when they're good in terms of guys like Tony Allen or fucking Al Horford or whatever. He's really good at identifying NBA talent, and people were saying that he's so good at it. Why did he mess this up? I think that's a really fucking stupid train of thought. Like your whole point is he's really good. Like his past record shows that he's really good at identifying talent. But this thing that hasn't happened yet, this contract that hasn't taken effect yet, is bad. So why did he do it? So I thought that line of thing was really stupid, and I wanted to call that out. I'm pretty sure, and the thing that sucks, I'm pretty sure it was Joe Murray who said it the most, and I love Joe Murray. So that hurt me to hear because I thought it was a really dumb line of thinking. But I wanted to say that because I remembered it because you brought up Scary Terry. So the thing, I wonder if this does affect Terry Rozier's future with the team because you now have $14 million or $13 million a year AAV. We don't know the yearly output, the yearly breakdown of the contract yet. So we don't know if it's going to be $13 million every year, or if it's going to be elevating or de-escalating or whatever. But this has a legitimate effect about Terry Rozier's future because you can't have $28 million locked up in backup point guard. That's just not effective. You can't run your team like that. And in my opinion, this move basically makes it like the Celtics get to now choose between Terry Rozier and Kyrie Irving. And we'd all pick Kyrie Irving in that if they can get him. So, provided that Kyrie Irving wants to stay in Boston, Terry Rozier is gone, in my opinion. Which is, I love the Terry memes, but if it's between him and Kyrie, Kyrie's got to stay, right, Pete?
Yeah, like what I was gonna say is that I think that the Smart deal has more to do with the relationship now between Kyrie Irving and Terry Rozier. I mean, like you said, if the Celtics cannot re-sign Kyrie Irving and he decides to opt out and goes to New York, wherever, the Celtics almost have to get Terry Rozier, and then you have Marcus Smart as backup, or Marcus Smart as a starter and Terry Rozier, whatever. I mean, that's a moot point. But, yeah, it's definitely interesting, I think, now. And I like Terry Rozier, but I don't think that you can win a championship with him. I think you need a player like Kyrie. So for me, this just puts more added pressure that the Celtics really need to make sure that they can re-sign him. And I don't know if they can, to be perfectly honest.
I don't know if they can either, but I think it's something interesting to look forward to in the future. If Marcus Smart isn't, in fact, dealt for a guy like Anthony Davis.
I mean, Kyrie's knee. Kyrie's knee.
Yeah, go ahead. No, Jordan, go ahead. Jordan.
No, thanks.
Go ahead.
No, thanks.
Go ahead,
I appreciate it.
Keep fucking interrupting me.
You're digging a bigger hole.
No, but go ahead. Seriously, do go ahead, Jordan.
Okay. So Kyrie's knee's a big question too. So we know Rozier won't be traded by the start of the season. I mean, it's gonna be into the year. So if Kyrie's knee is dog shit, then they're gonna keep Rozier. And I think it's gonna be we won't really know for sure until probably close to the midway point of the season how Kyrie's knee is gonna hold up. So it's like keeping Rozier is kind of an insurance policy because he took off last year without Kyrie. I mean, he sucked a lot towards the end of the Cavs series, but he balled out for most of the time Kyrie was out. So if Kyrie's knees dog shit, Rozier's probably going to wind up staying. They'll just let him walk because I think that'll be smarter than bringing him back on a max deal or a super max deal and having his knee be a question mark every single year. So it kind of depends on Kyrie's knee also.
I think that's a valid factor. We're about 35, 40-ish minutes into the show, so we're going to get into some more ancillary topics. First, we're going to talk about Vlade Divac of the Kings and how he has some sort of crazy magical wizard powers to attract mediocre players to his team away from other NBA teams. The Sacramento Kings have officially now, as of the last hour, signed Nemanja Bjelica. Nemanja Bjelica. I'm going to speak Bjelica to a 3-year, $20.5 million deal. He was obviously, we talked about this earlier, he was rumored to be signing with Philly. He verbally agreed to sign there. Then he walked away saying that he was probably going to go play in Europe. And now he's signing with the Kings. And on top of that, Yogi Ferrell verbally agreed to re-sign with Dallas. He is now signed to a 2-year, $6 million deal with the Kings as well.
Wait, Yogi Berra?
Yogi Ferrell.
Yogi
I know
Berra.
Yogi Berra.
Yes, the skeleton of Yogi Berra has signed.
Yogi Ferrell sounds made up.
Point guard. Yogi Ferrell does. He sounds like a creative player in 2K. But.
He does. Yogi Bear.
So, what sort of crazy Eastern European warlockery does Vlade Divac have for the Kings, and why can't he use it to sign anybody worth shit?
Wait, who?
Pete.
You asking that?
Pete.
Wait, what was the question?
Just fucking talk about the Kings and how they have fucking wizard powers.
Well, I got nothing. So
I think the whole fucking situation is hilarious. Like, the Kings have managed to literally steal players from other teams, and they're only stealing shit players that would play in Sacramento. I think that's so poetic and hilarious. I don't know how you don't have a thought on that.
Well, I have a more thought on like the whole, like I know we were talking about this in the chat a couple days ago, and like the whole like loyalty aspect of it, of like, oh yeah, like I'll sign with you guys. No, I'm not going to. Oh, I'm going to sign somewhere else. And we kind of saw the same thing happen with DeAndre Jordan. And I guess you can kind of equate it to the Marcus Smart situation too. Like the whole loyalty thing in the NBA, I think, is like wildly overrated. And you have these guys like Isaiah Thomas, Marcus Smart, who are dying to get their money, and I'm definitely going to go to this team, or I'm definitely going to go to that team, and to me, like, it's just you go and get your money, and it is what it is. I mean, you have special types of guys that will take less money in order to stay with the team. But I think the vast majority of players are selfish, and then fans and teams expect different, like, from them. And for me, I mean, I think everybody in the NBA, like, the NBA is built on people being selfish. Like, Danny Ainge traded Isaiah Thomas after he played the day after his sister died, and he balled out in the playoffs. Like, that's just, it is what it is, So for, talking about tiny deals like this, like, just do what you want. Go where you can get the most money. That's what I think, at least.
Well, that wasn't a lot of Warlock discussion, but I'll let it slide this time. Jordan, I have
no fucking idea what you're talking about, so I
want you to give me some Wizard 101 shit right now, Jordan. What do you think about Vlade Divac being a fucking Eastern European possible vampire?
Well, I have no idea where exactly in Eastern Europe Vlade Divac is from, and where Nemanja, whatever his last name is from. So I don't know if there's any correlation.
Yeah, Nemanja Bulimia or whatever.
Bulimia, wherever the hell he's from. I don't know how close they are, or if they're in the same part, wherever the fuck they call it in Eastern Europe. But
country, they still call it country in Eastern Europe, Jordan. This isn't whatever block anymore.
I don't fucking know. I only know America. It's
rehired.
Rehired, sweet. Is the whole filled back in? Are we good, or am I still in it a little bit? I don't know. I mean, this guy, I remember playing with my NBA 2K created guy on the Timberwolves, and he was on the Timberwolves. He was a pretty good shooter. I mean, so that's all I know about him.
He is a decent stretch four. He is.
I mean, I went to a game 2 years ago where he scored like 15 against the Celtics, but I mean, I don't know much about him. I don't really know. And the Kings make no sense. I mean, I guess that's where guys like Nemanja Bulimia and freaking Yogi Bear can go play and maybe make a name for themselves and maybe make more money, because it's such a shit franchise that they can play a lot and maybe they'll perform higher than their contract says, and they'll wind up making more money afterwards than they would if they went to Dallas and fucking Philly, because Bjelica probably wouldn't play much in Philadelphia anyway. He's basically a poor man's version of Ersan Ilyasova, who I think went back to Milwaukee.
Yeah, Ilyasova's gone. The thing with Bjelica and Angelica Bjelica, he's a little bit bigger than Ilyasova. Ilyasova is a paper tiger. Bjelica has a little bit of girth to him, so he's a big boy. He can kind of handle his own on the block. But I'm going to use this as a nice segue into the fact that Philly replaced this stretch four with a guy who can barely shoot the three in Mike Muscala from Atlanta is more indicative of the fact that Philly kind of sucks. And also, it's a perfect segue into the fact that Carmelo Anthony has been traded away from the Oklahoma City Thunder. This is one of the most interesting. It's both been rapid and as slow as possible kind of decline for Carmelo Anthony. I feel like he's been falling as fast as possible, but for like the last 5 years. So it's a really interesting situation. Do you guys remember Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide?
Big fan of that show. I used to watch it every
He
day.
He was on an episode of that show when Ned found a pair of autographed Carmelos back when he was still with the Nuggets, and it was a great episode. And for him to go from that to being traded to Atlanta to get bought out is such a wild fall. I want to know what you think about this whole series arc for Carmelo Anthony, Pete. What do you think about Carmelo Anthony's fall from grace?
Well, I think first and foremost, this is such a good move for OKC. I mean, they got, what was it, like $100 million, I think, off the books for just to trade him.
They got that much. Pete's you're about right, Pete, and it's not just because of the contract itself, which is about 30. It's also because of the luxury tax that they're going to save on that contract being removed as well, because they're going to not have to pay repeater tax or luxury tax this year because he's now off the books. And also, they got Dennis Schroeder, too, who's a good point guard who has given the Celtics problems in the past. So I'm glad to see him gone.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it. I'm like, how the hell did they give up fucking a shitty version of what Carmelo Anthony used to be and get a pretty decent player in return? And I think it's pretty
they gave up a first round draft pick for probably when they're going to be shit. So that's part
top
of it.
15
Yes,
protected though.
At least the first year it is protected. Yes, Jordan, that is correct. But still, I agree with Pete. Pete's right. They didn't give up a lot, and they got a pretty good point guard back.
And I think it's even more interesting now that they're going to tell Carmelo to go pound sand or whatever like that, and he's going to go jump ship to Houston.
Oh, yeah. A guy that might be able to actually bring Atlanta some notability, because we all know shorts with suit Trae Young isn't going to do that because he's going to be a fucking bust. This guy, I know he's washed, but he can still put some asses in seats, and they're still gonna fucking release him because because he doesn't want to be there, and they're just doing right by the player. Which, again, back to the loyalty discussion, that's an iffy proposition either way. But he's gonna join the Rockets, which is now just it's the full banana boat squad plus other gutless bums. I think it's gonna be a hilarious team to watch. Almost as funny as the Lakers this year. It's gonna be a lot of fun to watch the Western Conference. What do you think, Jordan? I kind of skipped over you. Go ahead.
Like Pete said, it makes absolutely no sense to why a team like Atlanta would get rid of a guy like Dennis Schroeder because he's their best player, and they trade him for a fat shell of Carmelo Anthony. Like he is
fat shell.
He has gotten fucking huge, and like we get these workout videos of him in the offseason with his hoodie on, and people get hyped up like, oh, Carmelo Anthony can make wide open mid-range jump shots with a hoodie on in the middle of the summer because that makes perfect sense. That's great. And all, I can do the same fucking thing, and I'm fat and out of shape.
You can.
I could. I've done it before. I will tweet a video out.
Jordan, you couldn't hit water if you fell out of a boat. Don't talk about hitting your mid-range jumpers.
All right, let's not talk about my batting skills. We're talking about my jump shooting skills. But like he's going to wind up going to Houston. I mean, is that confirmed yet? Because I know Miami was also in this form. Yeah,
it's not confirmed yet.
It's not confirmed yet, but it's very likely. I mean, why would he go to Miami? I mean, that makes no sense. So he'd probably be going to Houston, and that's gonna be an absolute dumpster fire there too, because you're gonna have a ball hog and Harden. I mean, Harden's gotten a lot of assists lately, but now he's got Chris Paul, Melo's whatever he is now to them. I mean, they're Trevor Ariza replacement, and I don't think I never thought I'd ever use that to describe a Carmelo Anthony role on a team. Is he's replacing Trevor Ariza. This is a guy that used to be one of the most exciting players to watch in the NBA, and now he's Trevor Ariza's replacement.
And the scary part about that is he doesn't even fit Trevor Ariza replacement because he doesn't have the same skill set.
He's worse than Trevor Ariza, and that's pathetic.
He has no defensive ability, and his shooting has gotten worse than Trevor Ariza. It's insane.
It's sad. It really is. I mean, and we never know. Maybe he just didn't like playing with Russell Westbrook. Maybe he'll change something, and he'll be at least better than he was last year for Houston, because I think playing with Chris Paul, playing with James Harden might have a little bit of an effect on him. It'll take some pressure off of him. But he's nowhere near the player he used to be. So wherever he goes, it's going to wind up being laughable how bad he how bad that experiment goes, and he may even wind up getting moved again from whatever team he's on this season. It's just sad to see the catastrophic collapse of a guy. He was my favorite player when I was little.
I still wear my Carmelo Jordans. I wear them to work every day.
Are they the same ones from Ned's Declassified?
No, they're not that old, thankfully.
That's unfortunate.
But I say while we're talking about Carmelo, we just move right into final takes. The first question of the final takes this week is, by the 27th, who does Carmelo Anthony sign with? Your most likely answers are probably Rockets, Heat, or no one yet. I'll let you start, Jordan. What do you think? Where do you think he's going to sign? I know it's a really hard decision.
Houston. It just makes way too much sense. I mean, just from a chance of winning standpoint, I mean, at this point, he probably wants a ring more than anything. Not that him going to Houston is going to make them anywhere close to as good as Golden State, but it gives him the best chance than rather if he went to Miami. So probably Houston. It makes the most sense. It may not be by the 27th, but it'll be right around that timetable.
Yep. I agree. Pete, you think he's going to sign for the 27th? And if he does, who do you think he's going to sign with?
Yeah, I think he's going to go to Houston. But an interesting one, I want to know what you guys think about it. What do you think about the Lakers?
The Lakers? I think that would be interesting. It would just add more stupid attitude and poor basketball IQ to the team.
Bingo.
So I would love them to pile on. That's why I wanted DeMarcus Cousins to go there, because even though he would be the second best player on that team, he'd also be a fucking disaster in the locker room. Like my rooting interests this year are with the Celtics, the Lakers being a fucking sidecar, and I guess now for DeMar DeRozan to beat the Lakers, like that, to beat LeBron James. Those are my three things on my list this year in terms of my NBA rooting interests. So it would be really funny. I would really love it, but you don't think he's actually going to do that, right? You think he's going to go to Houston?
Yeah, I mean, from everything that we've heard from him, he says that he still wants to get like decent money and be a starter, and I don't know if he could do that on the Lakers.
He's worse than Michael Beasley.
He is worse than Michael Beasley. He wouldn't start over Michael Beasley.
He's worse than Michael Beasley now.
Oh god, that's so sad.
I know. It hurts me to say that.
But I also agree. I'm going to be boring. He's going to sign with Houston in the next 2 or 3 days. We'll move on to question number 2 right now. Question number 2 is, will Clint Capella, another Rocket, will he sign by the 27th with anybody? Will he sign at all? Pete, I'll start with you this time.
By the 27th, I'm going to say yeah. I think that Houston is going to get a deal with him. I think that they almost have to at this point, right? I mean, unless somebody comes out and gives him a fat contract offer, like you'd have to think that Houston's going to match it, right?
Yeah. So you think that he's going to sign anywhere by the 27th?
Yeah, I think I think that he's going to end up back in Houston. I just don't know how.
Okay, so I agree with what you're saying, but my conclusion is different. I don't think he's going to sign by the 27th, and part of it is because I don't think any other team's going to offer him anything substantial. No, because they know. I think it's going to be a Marcus Smart situation. They know no matter what they offer, Houston will match. So what's the point? Don't give Houston the opportunity to get a lower contract signed than they would have if they were negotiating with themselves. Similar to what Danny Ainge has had to do. Danny Ainge probably went above where the market value would approximately be to sign him this year so that it was below market for next year. So I think that no one's going to offer him anything, and they're just going to keep kind of playing chicken. So I think that he's not going to sign by the 27th, but he will eventually sign with Houston. Jordan, what are your thoughts?
I also am going to say he doesn't sign by the 27th. It's kind of like a cat and mouse game. It's just going to be like who bites first at this point. But I don't see any team, like you said, making an offer for him because it'd probably be rendered pointless. It just makes all the sense in the world for him to go back to Houston. I mean, he was a guy that I thought maybe the Celtics would have a little bit of interest in when the offseason started, and they obviously went back with Aaron Baines. But he's a good player, and I think he fits Houston's system very well. I mean, he's a guy that can just throw down lobs, get rebounds. I mean, he's the kind of big that a team like Houston needs to go along with all their running and gunning 3-point firepower. So he's going to wind up signing back with them, but I don't think it'll be by the 27th.
Okay, makes sense. Obviously, because I agree with you. So for the last question, for those of you who aren't aware, there is literally nothing scheduled on the NBA calendar before the next show. Like the next NBA date is like in August, like August 4th or something, and it's the NBA game in Africa. So there's nothing else NBA to talk about. So since we're a Boston show, and just to make sure that we have 3 questions for next week, so I can be amply punished for however many I get wrong, we're gonna talk a little sports, specifically hand egg and or football, depending on how much of a British twat you want to be. So Tom Brady said on Instagram that he's going to show up early to training camp, specifically 4 days early. So I'm going to start with the question being, does Tom Brady actually show up early to training camp? And I say no. I think that whatever he says on Instagram has no value to it. So I think the fact that he said on Instagram and not in some sort of official context means that he's not going to show up as early as he says. He might show up a day early, but he's not going to show up 4 days early like he said. That's my own personal opinion. Also, because I'm kind of really fucking sick of the whole Brady Belichick pissing contest they have going on. So I don't trust either of them right now. What do you think, Pete?
Yeah, I agree with you. And he's been doing some weird shit on Instagram lately too. Like he's been commenting on stuff like I know he commented on like a Barstool post about like eating ass. And then he
well, I mean, if you were Brady, wouldn't you eat that ass?
Probably.
Like that.
Yes.
And you know it's not gross like Jimmy G's girl. Like you know that you have a better idea of what's been in and or out of there. So it's less of a harrowing act to perform.
You know what's been in and out of Jimmy G's girl's ass too, because it's all been on fucking camera.
Yeah, it's all exactly. You know what's been down there, and you don't want to be in there. So,
oh my god.
Yeah, so you agree with me? You don't think he's going to be 4 days early?
No, like I said, I think he's been doing some weird shit on Instagram. Like he was talking about like how he's going to play until he's 45 or whatever, or not playing until he's 40. I don't remember what it was, but he's been going crazy on Instagram. So I really don't take anything he says on that at face value.
Okay. What about you, Jordan? What do you think?
I mean, he's been saying a lot of stuff and then backtracking on it, like Pete said, and the whole thing playing until he's 45 and then saying he's not. I mean, like he said at the beginning of the offseason, the end is coming sooner rather than later, and then like a week later, it's like, I still have full intention of playing until I'm 45 years old. I don't even fucking understand what's going through his head at this point. So, no, I also will say he's not there 4 days before training camp starts. And, yeah, I just don't see it happening. I think he will show up early because it's just something Tom Brady does, but 4 days early, it's not something that I see happening.
All right, fair enough. Well, that just about wraps it up for us tonight. Pretty good show considering that it's the middle of fucking July and there shouldn't be anything to talk about in the NBA. Hopefully Ryan will be back either with or without pink eye. I can take it either way. Jordan, looks like you should probably go get some pink eye right now, considering looks like there's about to be a romp going on in your hotel room.
Yeah,
so
this is getting aggressive back here.
Don't be silly. Wrap your willy. Only fools don't wrap their tools. So you have fun with that.
Behind me, so that's not happening.
Yeah, Pete, you also do whatever it is you do. I don't want to know about your personal life because it's gross and weird and disgusting.
Are you sure you don't want to have time?
I actually really want to know more about Pete's.
We actually don't have time, though, so that just about does it for us. And we will see you next week. Hopefully same time, same place, July 27th, year of our Lord, 2028. We will see you then. Thanks, everybody. Bye.